Good evening, everyone. Why don't we get started? The Marin Clean Energy Board for meeting for Thursday, July 3rd. It looks like we have a full house. Thank you for everyone coming. Great way to start a long weekend. With the Marin Clean Energy Board meeting.
Yeah, just great.
Yeah. So, item 1 is board announcements. It doesn't look like we have any. Item 2, public open time. Matters not on the agenda. None this evening. Item 3, report from executive officer. Damon.
Great. I have just a couple of items this evening. First, to give everyone thanks for being here tonight. We're giving you August off. There will be no board meeting in August. So we'll be back to our regular board meeting schedule in September, and just to punish you for having the month off, we'll have a retreat in September. Yeah, a full day of MCE in September, but more to come on that. I wanted to just highlight three quick, exciting factoids about things that have happened lately related to some of our primary goals. We have had 5 feed-in tariff applications come in the last 2 weeks. Is that okay? So I'm really excited about that. We're seeing a lot of momentum on the feed-in tariff front. So you'll be hearing more about these applications as they work their way through the process. Also, as many of you have probably already heard, the Novato Coulee Quarry project was approved by the Planning Commission last week, and that's really exciting. That is a project that is likely going to be filling the soul shares need that we're going to have as far as serving customers with that third product option. And the soul shares sign-ups on the customer side, we've seen over 30 customers already sign up for the soul shares program, and it caps out at 200. So we're already well on our way to getting that subscribed, and we're really excited that we also have a project now that will be a good fit for that. So those were my main quick updates. Emily also has a couple of dates to let you know about for upcoming board-related events.
Yeah, so we have in August, on likely the 22nd, we're going to be hosting the California Energy Choice Workshop, which is really kind of a nuts and bolts 101, how to basically start and operate a CCA. And so we're looking to invite folks statewide. Sorry for all you way back here. You can stand up here for a second. So we're looking for several guest speakers sort of to help facilitate the workshop. John Dalessi is going to be one of them. Folks from Sonoma Clean Power, Lean, Sierra Club, CPUC, and all of this will be in an email. So just wanted to give you a heads up for that. We'd love for board participation at that event. And then October 23rd, even more exciting, we have a field trip planned for Calpine, which we hope you guys can try to book time to come with us. It probably is a day-long commitment. It's a couple hours to get up there, about 2.5 to 3 to get up there. We're going to be renting a bus, so we would love for you guys to participate. It'd be a fun field trip, excellent way to see some of our local resource, and lunch as well provided, and more details to come on that, but maybe just bookmark your calendars so you can come along with us. That's it. Okay. That's all that we have.
Dawn?
Yes.
You're going to be doing the League of California Cities
Yes.
debate. Did you want to announce that? Because I think a lot of people, we want to get them there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I don't have that date right in front of me.
I think it's the 24th, July 24th.
July 24th. That's an evening meeting, and we'll be talking
Venetia.
about. That's right, Venetia. We'll be talking about CCA in general, answering questions, and folks are welcome to come to that. We'll also send a reminder via email.
Good.
So yeah, I hope folks can get that on their calendars. It'd be great to have a couple of board members who can, have you assist with answering questions and say a little bit about the experience of being on the board as well.
I think I'm going to be there.
Oh, good. Be great. Yeah, we've had a lot of interest from Venetia in particular, kind of outside of the League of Cities, but the city of Venetia has been very interested, and of course they're on the agenda for tonight, so it's a good timing.
Great. Anything else, Don?
That's it from my report.
Any questions or comments for Don? Okay. Item 4, consent calendar. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at that.
One comment.
Yes.
The note of the minutes are great.
They were really
big
detailed.
What a big difference.
Got it done.
Thank you very much. I know it's more of a
We
burden.
were hoping you wouldn't.
It's more of a burden, but the accountability and the transparency
Very.
is well worth it. So
Thank you,
very much.
Director Green. I concur with that.
You asked for more.
Double-digit pages is okay, but not triple digits.
Well, we liked it, so, okay, anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Item 5, resolution approving, potentially approving City of San Pablo as a member of MCE.
Great, so I'll say a little bit about this, and then John's going to jump in as well. As you all know, we've had a request from the City of San Pablo to become a member of MCE, and as you all probably remember, San Pablo is bordered on 4 sides with the City of Richmond, and so it seemed to be literally a good fit for our organization. We undertook a membership analysis a couple of months ago, and the results are now completed and have been presented to our executive committee. And the results were overall very positive. So I'm going to turn it over to John to say a little bit more about that.
Okay, so I can't go anywhere without a PowerPoint, so everything up. Okay, so the new membership policy that has been established here by your board requires a quantitative study of any application for new membership in MCE. And that's really a core part of the evaluation process from our perspective to see what the implications would be beneficial to have additional customers in that jurisdiction. So the primary focus of the quantitative study is looking at what are the expected net rate impacts to existing MCE customers. Would it be beneficial in the sense of reducing MCE rates? So that's kind of the core threshold question. And also, what are the environmental impacts in the terms of reducing or accelerating reductions in greenhouse gases and increasing use of renewable energy in the state of California? So that's really what the purpose of the quantitative assessment is. And so recently you were briefed on a very similar study done for the Napa County application. And tonight we did the study for the city of San Pablo. As Don mentioned, surrounded by the city of Richmond, population about 30,000 people, and the city itself is relatively small, 2.6 square miles. Before kind of jumping into the study itself, just a refresher, provide some context of what MCE's current customer base looks like. So as of today, MCE serves about 125,000 electric customers, sells about 1.3 million megawatt hours of energy on every year. Peak demand, 250 megawatts roughly. And here are some statistics in regards to some of the renewable and environmental characteristics of the energy product that MCE procures and sells to its customers. 50% overall renewable content, 27% of that is LPS qualified, and 60% of the portfolio is carbon-free, so that it would include renewable energy as well as other non-carbon emitting sources such as large hydroelectric power. Overall portfolio GHG emissions rate among the lowest in the industry, 370 pounds of CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour, and so that's compares favorably to, say, PG&E, which is the most recently reported emissions rate is 445 pounds per CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour. This data here, these statistics do not include the addition of the Napa County customers. So if you recall, that was another 15,000 or so potential customers, and about a little over 20% potential increase in sales, or increase in the numbers reported here. So as Don mentioned, the request for expression of interest by San Pablo was received in March, And in April, the board approved the completion of the quantitative study. We completed that in June, and the executive committee was briefed on the results. And this presentation is essentially a repeat of what the ex-com saw. In summary, the findings were favorable. So what we found is, it's not a real large increase in load. It's a relatively small city, but that said, we'd anticipate about a 1% rate benefit for existing MCE customers. In other words, MCE rates are expected to be 1% lower with the addition of San Pablo customers than they otherwise would be without those customers. So there's a positive rate impact to existing and also the new customers. Increase in renewable energy, that's just because MCE maintains a higher renewable content than the default service for PG&E. That would be 20,000 megawatt hours annually. To put that in a little bit more concrete terms, that would be roughly the size of a landfill project, say at the Redwood landfill. That would be an equivalent amount of that project we're built. And reduction in GHG emissions estimated at 5.5 million pounds per year. So in terms of the potential customers in the city, there's nearly 10,000 potential new customers. These are all of the current PG&E bundled customers. So there hasn't been any adjustments to these figures for anticipated participation or opt-outs of the program. So actual enrollments obviously would be somewhat lower than these numbers depending on the opt-out rate. We've assumed 15% opt-out rate in the numbers that I'll present later in the study, but these are unadjusted figures. The potential sales at the bottom there is about 90,000 megawatt hours. That's about 6 or 7% increase in total program sales. And in terms of differences, say with this customer base versus the current MCE customer base, I think what I'd observe is that proportionately there's more residential customers than we have today, on a percentage basis. And also fewer small commercial customers. And the other thing that's somewhat noteworthy, I think, is the residential customers are relatively small users of electricity. You can see 349 kilowatt hours per month on average. That's pretty small. Definitely lower than the current average for MCE. I think the primary reason, well, one of the reasons for that is there's a fair amount of rental occupied housing in the city, and I think probably just generally smaller homes in general. So overall, it's the customers in San Pablo use about 18% less energy per capita than the current customer base. In terms of load profile, there's not a lot to see here, to be honest with you. The load is very similar to the load profile is very similar to our existing customer base. Most of the energy is used during the winter times. It's a little bit unlike Napa, where we have that kind of counter-cyclical, where most of the energy in Napa is used in the summer, and so it fills in a little bit. Here, it's not so much the case. We get some diversity benefit, but not as pronounced. So in terms of then the key assumptions that were used in the study, for purposes of simplicity, if nothing else, we assume that the customer enrollments would occur at the start of the next fiscal year in April 2015. I think the actual enrollment date might be advanced or maybe delayed, a couple of months around that. But for purposes of the analysis, we started at the beginning of the fiscal year. As I mentioned, we assume that there would be an 85% participation rate in the city, which is comparable to what we saw with the City of Richmond expansion. I think the more recent numbers are pretty reflective of what we would see going forward. So that translates into about a 6% potential sales increase. What we found, we looked at the expected revenues from these customers relative to the increase in direct costs, so procure the power and other costs related to customer service and data management. We found that there is projected to be a relatively small surplus. That surplus is assumed to offset fixed costs of the agency, so contributes to staff costs and office and other fixed costs, which translates into potential rate reductions for MCE customers. And as I mentioned, that overall rate reduction is estimated at 1%. And then here, just a little bit more detail for more folks who like numbers. So we had estimated incremental revenue, so the revenue from customers in San Pablo would be about $6 million in the next fiscal year. And you can see here kind of a breakdown of the variable costs that would be incurred, power supply costs and building other costs. So total costs would increase by about $4.6 million, and the remainder would be what's available for rate reductions. So with that, are there any questions? Sir?
As we grow, are we able to keep the percentage of renewable content up at the 50% level, or is it naturally going to slide down as we grow?
I don't see any problem in keeping the renewable content at that level. We have plenty of renewable opportunities to choose from.
If they have a higher percentage of renters, how do you expect that to affect the opt-out rate? Are tenants more likely to do it than an owner on a rental building?
Yeah, we don't, as far as I know, we don't compile any data, at that level of opt-out rates from various categories or subcategories of the residential sector. I don't know why it would be different. I think what we have seen is a pretty consistent opt-out rate even across different types of customers. So a residential customer and a commercial customer, we've seen early on that 20% was kind of a magic number and it held up pretty well. And then with Richmond, and some of this may be due to the rates, I think, being lower, frankly. That 15% figure was pretty common even across customers. So while we don't have data to sort of look within the residential class, I would expect it wouldn't be significantly different.
Just as far as the costs that are going to be incurred from the expansion, I mean, are we going to incur any staff cost increase? And then the other thing I was wondering is we're required to have a power reserve to serve the load. Mm-hmm. So as that expands, do we have to purchase further reserves, and are there any costs associated with that reduce the benefit to the ratepayers?
Right. So let me hit the last one first. So in terms of the reserves, those are accounted for in these numbers. So we have capacity reserves, which is an additional cost that's factored into the power supply cost line item. We also have financial reserves. So we target in our rate structure about a 3% annual contribution to reserve. So that's been factored in as well to the 1% increase. So we've assumed that these customers would also have to support that 3% reserve level, so the additional revenue, the additional surplus beyond that would go to rate reductions. In terms of the first question, there will be costs associated with implementation, procuring the power, communicating to the customers, enrolling them, marketing, all that stuff. There was a sort of a backward-looking analysis of what was spent with the city of Richmond, and we quantified that was about $450,000 in those types of costs. We would expect it to certainly not exceed that because this is a lot smaller, it's a third of the size. Some of those costs are staff that are kind of on board now and can to some extent be repurposed, I think, towards it. And Don might want to say more on these points, but I think there will be some costs. The other thing is, if this expansion were done at the same time as Napa, again, you can share those activities.
Director Don.
Back on a slide or two before, there seem to be a couple of very large commercial customers that use a lot of power. Are those customers that you, or the agency feels that they can capture?
We do, and we've had very good success with the largest customers historically. And the rates that MCE offers to those customers is very competitive and actually results in lower costs for those customers. And a lot of times, those are the most price sensitive, right? Because it adds straight to their bottom line of their business, and it's a significant portion of their overall business expense. So I think the rate competitiveness will enable us to be successful retaining those customers and attracting those customers. It's not the case that we need those customers necessarily for the expansion to still be beneficial, because the fact of the matter is, even though they're very large users, so they're great customers to have, the rate is also relatively low for those types of customers. On a per kilowatt hour basis, the rate might be, just as an example, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and a residential customer might be 8 cents per kilowatt hour. So, even though they buy a lot from you, your unit margin is pretty narrow, and so you're not totally dependent on that type of customer. All of the customers, for the most part, are beneficial.
Okay, any other questions? Comments from the public? Okay, so we're looking for a vote on this item, basically to approve the City of San Pablo as a member of MCE.
Absolutely.
Important decision, all right. Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye. Yes.
Opposed? That matter carries. We're looking forward to, well, Don, what's the next step? So now this goes back to San Pablo.
Yeah, exactly. So this action will enable staff to submit the revised implementation plan. And you may recall that at our last board meeting, the board approved the revisions to the implementation plan to add the county of Napa.
Right.
And because they still have not done the final read of the ordinance, we haven't yet submitted the implementation plan. We figured it might make the most sense to make both of the changes for both San Pablo and Napa, and then submit the implementation plan at one time to the CPC. I think their staff will appreciate that. So with this action, we will be revising some of the charts in the plan. In your packet, you saw a current version of the revised implementation plan, which we've already added much of the NAPA information. We still need to make some final changes to some of the charts and graphic information that adds San Pablo, and then we'll submit that. And then there will be a final action that needs to be taken by the City of San Pablo to actually approve the ordinance authorizing the CCA program in their community, and that is scheduled for a first reading later this month, I believe on the 22nd.
Okay, great.
Can we turn off track changes on the implementation plan then, so we don't have so many changes to go through every time?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, and we're happy to send you a clean version as well. We thought the red line would be easier, so you don't have to read the whole entire thing.
Yeah, eventually.
But we do have a clean copy as well.
Yeah, once it's finalized.
Absolutely.
Okay, item 6, request for MCE membership from the City of Benicia.
Great. So the City of Benicia has been very interested in the possibility of exploring membership with MCE for many of the reasons that we saw in San Pablo. There's a real interest among their community members in having a choice for their energy supply. Solano County is really sandwiched between Napa County and Contra Costa County, where Richmond and San Pablo are located. So they certainly heard a lot about the program and are very interested in the possibility of having a choice for their customers. They also are very aligned as far as environmental objectives. They're very interested in finding ways to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. They do have a large refinery in their community, Valero. Some of you might be familiar with them. And I think we've seen similar sentiment in the community around clean energy, because I think partly because of that, like we've seen in the city of Richmond, where there's a real interest and a real awareness in the community about energy generation and some of the impacts it can have on communities. So So the city of Benicia has been very interested in exploring the MCE membership. They also are a small enough community that their size doesn't lend itself to the creation of their own CCA program all themselves. So that's another reason why they've been reaching out to us. Their population is a little bit smaller than Napa. Population's just over 25,000, just around 10,000 households. So we'd be looking at a customer base a little less than that. And I think a couple things that are worth noting, in 2007, Benicia joined the ICLEI climate protection campaign, looking at ways that they could reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and also setting targets for GHG reduction. And that was several years ago, and the target that they set was reducing GHG emissions to 10% below 2000 levels by 2020. So that's one of the kind of the reasons behind their request. They also have done, they recently adopted a GHG inventory update report, and that outlines some strategies to reach their 2020 targets. This is one program that has really risen to the top in their the range of projects that they're looking to implement in the next few months regarding GHG reductions. And at their meeting last month that I participated in, they've really done a comprehensive evaluation of about 30 different programs in their community that would help them to enable GHG reductions. And they have placed MCE at the very top of the list and had strong recommendations for their council. They had an environmental committee and community members that had made strong recommendations to the council regarding their participation in our program. At the same time, they also set aside dollars to cover the cost of doing the membership study. So there's very strong interest there, and I think those are kind of the high points. One other thing that Greg has pointed out a couple times is that the Benicia area and Solano County in general is a great place for renewable resources, and so that's another reason why there might be a really good fit there for MCE service. So at this point, the recommendation from staff is that we approve the membership request from the city of Benicia, and then that would clear the path for a membership analysis to take place. And one other thing I think that would be worth mentioning, just for folks that might not be aware yet, there are a couple of cities that are in the East Bay that have been talking to MCE about possible membership, but have put their efforts on hold while they're watching to see what happens with the Alameda County CCA effort. And just last month, the Alameda County board voted unanimously to allocate $1.3 million to a CCA study. And so that's really exciting to see that. And knowing that Alameda County has taken that type of leadership role in moving forward on CCA, I think creates a reason for some of the East Bay communities that are not close to our existing service territory to potentially look at joining that CCA program, which we think is exciting. Benicia, of course, isn't in that area. They are closer to Napa. So that's why in our analysis of this request, we're feeling like it does make sense for us to move forward with this membership study. I'm happy to answer questions.
Is that another way of saying there isn't really anything else on the horizon for a while?
So that would be a fourth county. Is it necessary for that to happen before January 1st, or is the grandfathering language in AB 2145, would that allow for that regardless? Because
it is necessary for that action to take place before the end of the calendar year.
does that then open up the entire, or any municipality within the county for membership, since there's at least one?
Yes, that is our interpretation of the current language in AB 2145. And we are going to spend some time talking about that towards the end of our agenda this evening. But I would encourage you all to take a look at the amended language and let us know if you have any concerns about that. But we think that the language in the bill is worded in a broad way that really is tied to the geographic boundaries of a county, which seems to inherently encompass any cities within that county.
Director O'Donnell.
had the same question.
Just kind of a variation on the theme, since you mentioned some interest that may be put to the side because of what Alameda County may be doing. But is there any implications for the way the legislation is now getting teed up for us pursuing some opportunities if Alameda County doesn't actually go forward? Or are we going to be cut out?
Well, I think that if the legislation, AB 2145, goes forward in its current form and is approved, and if it makes it through the Senate and then also has to go back through the Assembly side, and if it is also approved by the governor and goes into effect, then we would be limited to only providing service in counties that have who have passed an ordinance to join MCE by the end of the calendar year.
Right. So unless an ordinance is passed somewhere in Alameda County, and all of those other agencies actually come to play, then that puts a cap on our ability to operate.
Correct.
If we are restricted to 3 contiguous counties, I guess Contra Costa is contiguous out in the middle of the bay.
Yeah, but there is grandfathering language in the bill.
Oh, okay, so
So that really only applies to MCE.
Well, we wouldn't lose anything that we had already brought in, but if we had brought in 4 different counties, does that allow us to expand in all 4 counties or not?
Well, if we are serving customers, or if an ordinance, really the trigger is if an ordinance has been passed in a community, in any county really, by the end of the year, then we would have the ability to serve customers within those counties anytime in the future. So for example...
And we could add additional
Yes, within those counties. So, for example, some of the cities within the county of Napa might want to join at some point in the future. It's our understanding, based on the current proposed language in the bill, that that would be allowed. Solano County, for example, might decide at one point they want to join Benicia and be part of MCE. It's our understanding that would be allowed. But if we got a request from a brand new county after January 1, that would not be allowed.
And you're going to go over that a little bit more later.
Yes.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Members of the public? And Dawn, as always, of course, even if we go forward with this step, it's dependent on seeing the results of the study.
Yeah, that's a very important clarification, is that while the action tonight would be to approve membership requests, it really is subject to a positive outcome with the membership study. If we were to conduct a membership study and then end up with a result that would have a net negative impact on our budget and on our rates, we would not be able to move forward. And the city of Benicia is aware of that.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That matter carries. Okay, item 7, land option and lease agreement with Chevron Products.
Good evening. So as a result of our ongoing search for new places to build solar facilities in our jurisdiction, Chevron actually offered a site to us that they had attempted to get permitted for a solar project of their own a year or 2 ago, but they could not make the numbers pencil for the type of return that they needed as a for-profit corporation. They've offered us roughly 60 acres on their Richmond Refiner site. It's immediately adjacent to Richmond Parkway and Hensley Drive, West Hensley Drive. So very visible, very public site. There will be an opportunity to have sort of a kiosk or museum sort of technology demonstration facility there for public access. So people can overlook the site and get current information on programs and opportunities. The lease will be basically a no-cost lease, $1 per year lease. There'll be a deposit for us, a security deposit, I think roughly $100,000 in the contract. That's the only real significant financial investment. The site will be very easy to permit because it is in a M3 zoning, which allows major utility uses by right. And with Director Butt's City Council Richmond resolution, that permits any solar facility in any zoning district with only an ministerial permit. It should be save us about $300,000 in the permitting costs for the site. We are talking with some folks to do what's called a utility prepaid financing package, which should get the rates down very competitive to what we're paying on market prices now. So all in all, it's a very positive site, high visibility, great feedback from everybody we talked to in the city of Richmond, that I've talked to. The site does have some environmental concerns. It is a brownfield site, it's a landfill site, and a portion of the site is a capped landfill. There won't be able to do any penetration on those, and those will be structures that are mounted completely on top of the ground. So there won't be disturbance of any toxics or anything there. The other, about a 20-acre portion of the site is fairly level, old ponds that we can penetrate, so those will be more robust structures. But all in all, a very great site, very little issues, and very close, obviously, to our loads in the area. So it will sponsor a minimum of 2 megawatts to a maximum of 12 megawatts. We'll probably develop in multiple phases over a 5-year period or so. We should really get the permitting and the interconnection done fairly quickly and easily. It's within a mile of a major substation. It's in the midst of some renovation already for PG&E, so it should be able to handle the power very easily. And with that, if you have any questions?
Talk a little bit about what the plan is for the actual construction. Who's going to do the construction? How's it going to get paid for? How's all that? How are you anticipating that's going to work?
So we're anticipating doing the engineering and design work for the facility itself, and then having a RFP for the development side, the labor and construction side.
For contractors?
So there will be language to incorporate the City of Richmond's local hire policies, as well as union labor and prevailing wage policies.
I saw that in the staff report. So it really is, it's going to be our baby.
Yeah, part of the lease requirements is that we have to own it within the minimum time, so that we would incorporate a tax equity investor that would capture all the tax benefits, and then the project would be returned to us.
Through public finance.
But we would do, you want to talk a little bit about the bond financing that would be required for it?
It could be bond financing, it could be a loan also. It's still sort of on the horizon of which option we would use. But roughly, we'd have to prepay roughly half, 40% to 50% of the development costs up front, and the balance would be paid over the term of the contract.
Okay.
It'd be roughly about a $45 million project, give or take.
Just-
Sorry.
Oh, just to be clear, what's the benefit to Chevron in doing this?
Public relations, for the most part. They do have part of their environmental impact report for their modernization program requires the 2 megawatt component. That's one reason why we have a 2 megawatt minimum. They're required to provide 2 megawatts of solar locally. That's the biggest benefit to them. We are not actually contingent upon their environmental impact report, but we cannot exercise the option until after their EIR is approved on terms that they're agreeable to them.
I mean, I think it's important also to understand there's a number of steps, and this is one step of this. Approving this lease isn't saying you're going to build a project and finance it and all these things. It's just a step.
Yeah, this just basically gives us the right to go
it's an
inside,
option.
do the pre-engineering.
The other thing it gives us the ability to do is apply for the interconnection permit that we need with PG&E to get the site built, and that can take 6 months or longer. So getting that process started is something we're eager to do sooner rather than later.
Yeah, you mentioned it was a brownfield site. It used to be a waste management landfill. If we end up owning it, are there any risks involved to us that later on it might turn out to have some toxicity associated with it?
There's sort of mutual hold harmless language in the lease agreement, the option agreement.
Which means we hold them harmless so that they accept all responsibility.
For anything we cause, anything that's existing on site is existing on site. So there's sort of a mutual agreement. As long as we're not penetrating the landfill cap and don't have any issues in that regard, it should not be a major issue. Obviously, we're going to be very careful.
Yeah, we aren't looking to own the land. We are looking to use it to place solar panels on.
Well, I thought after 7 years we end up owning
the
We
project.
own the solar.
But continues a lease for the
It's a legitimate concern.
So,
You know, just a word of caution, there's all kinds of language in environmental law, which I'm sure our council here knows, refer to potentially responsible parties in the event of any contamination.
Yeah.
And that I hope we are going to do a really thorough review of what the site, the brownfield site, which is acknowledged in the disclosure as a commercial site that may have been contaminated, I would think, so that we don't assume responsibility for that, and that if there is some knowledge of contamination or pollution responsibility, that when you go through the contracting portion of this, that it's negotiated that you know, there's an indemnity of some kind. I think that the reciprocal indemnities might be an after-the-fact recovery, but does not stop us from being the first stop in the event there is a pollution-related event or discovery of a pollution-related circumstance, which means that we would be, you know, maybe at the end of the day have some recovery, but in the first instance we might be obliged to do cleanup and other things, which I suspect would not fit well within our budget.
Greg, yeah.
Well, you know, actually, Schumann Haley was the firm that reviewed the lease options. So my firm, we were not involved in reviewing this particular transaction, but there's been separate counsel for MCE to evaluate that. So that is some clearly very good questions here, and that does need to be looked at very carefully before any decision is made to go forward with exercising the option and building a facility.
I'm not expressing any disagreement with the concept. It seems like a great plan. You've done a thorough review, but I personally have some experience with this. I already know that it is, it can overwhelm and dwarf any potential savings.
So even, yeah, so I'm just trying to conceptualize that. You put the panels on, the theory would be that, because pollution already exists to the extent it's there, but that you disturb it somehow?
No, my understanding of the way that at least the law is commonly interpreted is that it's an irrelevancy whether or not you cause the pollution or whether you worsen the pollution. If you control and or own the site and pollution is discovered on it, then under most state and federal regulations, you can immediately be held responsible for the cleanup. You might subsequently have some right to pass off or get contribution or some allocation of who is the true wrongdoer. But in the first instance, if you're on it, you're responsible.
So even if you're the lessee,
correct.
So,
well,
conducting business unrelated
maybe
to...
Shoot Haley could give us some information about what the meaning of control in this context.
Yeah, clearly, if we were to become the owner of the land, we could be upfront liable no matter.
Sure, we get that.
It could have had pollution occurring years ago. But as lessee, that could be a different situation.
Because the classic case is a subsequent owner.
Yeah.
So that would be an interesting question. Lessee in unrelated business.
All those things are true. I've got a little experience in the area as well, and I think the concern's a legitimate one, even though it's a lease arrangement.
I think it needs to be looked at
because the
carefully.
theory could be that somehow we're disturbing.
Just even looking at the indemnification to the lease agreement right now.
So could we get some input from
not.
Shoot Haley, not just have them review it? I think our board would like some input on it.
Yeah.
There's another reason why that's a good idea to take further look at that, is that because if you go on to develop the site and you go on to bond financing, you're going to be required by the lender to do phase 1, phase 2 environmental studies on what the situation is, because that's going to be part of your financing package.
On the site that we have seen, there has been extensive environmental project closing documents on the site that document all the items on the site. It's a pretty extensive review. We've had some chance to take a look at it.
But I mean, in general, if I can just speak, I think the idea of using brownfield sites for solar panels is brilliant. It's a great policy for California to really pursue. There are a number of these sites all around the Bay Area, old industrial sites that have environmental issues, and they're ideal for this type of application. Ideal. As long as you look at all the environmental liability issues.
Yeah, I had in mind there. Yes.
Yeah.
Very much.
The lease has us indemnifying Chevron. I didn't see that it has cross indemnification. The memorandum of understanding talks about prior acts, subsequent acts. But I mean, I think the lease should really should include that distinction too, that we're not picking up their prior activity and vice versa, they will indemnify us. The lease now has us indemnifying them for our bad acts, so we would get called in on any kind of case, for sure. Just anybody running a case like that's gonna bring in everybody.
Certainly be a motivation to give it to us for $1.
Well, but I'm
If there's a
sure,
problem.
I'm sure we can get that worked out, you know. But what I was interested in is you mentioned there's going to be a project labor agreement on this or some sort of prevailing wage condition. So can you talk about that? Is that one of the conditions we're imposing on the subcontractors or on our contractors?
Yes, and it's partly to comply with the requirements of the city of Richmond. They have some very clear parameters that need to be followed by anyone doing work in the city. And they're really very good and comprehensive, but allow for flexibility where needed. So we'll be incorporating those provisions, and then in addition to that, and those are really about local hiring and less about union, not really about union hiring. So we'd be looking at a project labor agreement that does speak to the union aspect of the hiring, but also to the local hire requirements of the city.
Thanks.
And we are not subject to any of the existing labor agreements for the shuttering facilities.
Right.
So timing-wise, are we looking to get the analysis before taking the step of approving the option even, or seems like it?
That would seem to be smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Don, so we'd like to see a legal analysis by counsel specific to our potential liability, taking this, and how to minimize that, really.
That sounds good.
You heard a couple of great suggestions on amending the lease, for example. So, okay, great.
Before you move on,
Yes.
when that analysis comes back, do you think we could also have somebody from Shoot Mohali here that could answer questions? Because
Absolutely.
an analysis
That would
is
go
one
without-
thing, but a live body
Yeah.
interpreting it is a lot better.
And it looks like the attorney working on
Yeah.
this is a local, I know him, he's from Mill Valley, so why don't we get him in here as well? Okay, great.
Yeah. Do you feel like that timing-wise, that's going to create any problems as far as our obligations to get started? I know that we don't have a board meeting yet until September, but we could call a special meeting, or potentially delegate authority to TechCom. That's another idea.
Well, it would be good if we gave the option to be finalized and then subject to the analysis of the labor review before the actual lease execution.
What's the rush?
Just trying to get things in line, and part of our analysis to get access to do an environmental review is part of the option. We don't have the option, we don't actually have the physical access to the site to do that.
I think that, why don't we go ahead with the analysis, bring it back to the full board with someone from the law firm here, and then we'll move forward.
I think that would be
All right, great. Okay, item 8, MCE prevailing wage policy.
great. So I'll say a little about this item, but really this idea came from Director Bragman, who thought it would be helpful for us to start talking about the prevailing wage and labor practices that we have in-house and potentially developing a policy. And so this is really just a discussion item this evening that we wanted to tee up and get a little input on from the board, and then plan to bring it back to our executive committee to talk about it in a little more depth before we bring anything for finalization to the board. But I'll turn it over to Director Bragman to say a little bit about the impetus.
Okay. So I started a conversation with the North Bay Labor Council when this AB 2145 was really heating up, because it seemed like the impetus for that legislation was obviously coming from IBEW. So I figured I'd get a hold of a nice, friendly labor representative who I've had a relationship with, Lisa Maldonado, for a number of years, and I thought it was going to be a pretty easy sell, and not so. I got Jack Buckhorn was immediately put in the conversation, who I found out was an IBEW officer, and was very hostile immediately. Was hostile to CCAs in general, and was repeating really the company line about CCA not really providing clean energy, the whole story that PG&E and the investor-owned utilities were putting out there. So we got into a fairly long email correspondence, and I just kept reassuring him that I would be advocating for this, because I feel we are a public agency and we should be held to the same standards as any other public agency, to avoid the appearance that we're in some sense outsourcing union labor and greenwashing ourselves with it. And so I'm not sure what our policy is, if we have a policy, if it's practical. I think if it is practical, we ought to adopt it, because we could eliminate that hostility from organized labor to CCAs. And I think ultimately we need that kind of fusion of interests to make this thing grow, and to bring people into CCAs and to supporting it, and providing living wages for the community. So I certainly think all of our jurisdictions have prevailing wage policies. We're all obligated to follow prevailing wage policies. It sounds like we're trying to promote prevailing wage policies with our new projects. And I think at the end of the day, if we move in that direction, we may bring IBEW, maybe not IBEW, but we may bring in more support from the labor community, and not be facing the kind of legislative tangles that we're getting into. So that was the reason for my requesting it to be on the agenda, and I really do appreciate the memo. I'm not sure, I think it needs to be studied to make sure it's practical, that we can get it done. But like I said, I think in the long run, for our political sustainability, and really for what we're doing for the community, it's something we ought to be adopting. So,
thank you for teeing the issue up. So open to discussion or comment.
I do think in this context, even the statement that you made that there's an appearance that somehow we're outsourcing work to non-union workers is really objectionable, and I think it's very important as part of this conversation to really have a discussion so that everybody's informed of all the union jobs that are being created through everything that we're doing, so that it's absolutely clear that we're not doing that. And the fact that there's a lot of misinformation floating around in the world does not change the reality of MCE's existing operation. So I just want to be really clear on that while we're having this conversation. I don't have a problem with prevailing wage. We have a living wage ordinance in the county. That's not the issue. But this is not being driven by some sense that we are somehow currently doing something that's at all inappropriate or has a negative impact on our union workforce. So I just want to be really clear about that. And if people need more information on, this is an opportunity to have that conversation.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to say a little bit about that. The first thing I want to say is that what's here in the staff report and the attached draft policy reflects practices that we already have in place. So we're not really proposing anything different except having something that's been formally adopted. I think that our approach to union labor and local labor has been extremely supportive, and I think that we've gone out of our way to ensure that we are utilizing a local workforce, local job training programs through our energy efficiency and the local solar project that we saw installed here. But taking it a bit further, across the state when we're developing projects, we have a long list of the many power purchase agreements that we have in our portfolio, and every one of them has a labor tie to it. In many cases, the projects are being or have been constructed under a project labor agreement. And that's something that we fully support. That's something that we encourage. In our last open season process, we requested information from all bidders regarding project labor agreements that they've used in the past or we're planning to use for future projects. We also create a lot of jobs through the purchases that we're doing in the market, in the generation realm. So, while a lot of false claims have been made regarding MCE and the impact on union jobs, we have not caused any diminishing of any union jobs. No one's been able to point to one single union job that's been lost because of us. And I think that there's, in addition to the confusion and misinformation, there's just a real misunderstanding of how CCAs operate even within the IBEW, for example. 90% of IBEW members are linesmen, and they work on the T&D infrastructure, which doesn't change when a CCA shows up. Well, the IBEW members aren't being told this. They are being told to be afraid of CCAs, that CCAs will threaten their jobs, and it's kind of left at that, with a very basic level of information that is not accurate. And I've been privy to some of the white papers that they've circulated internally that have just filled with a lot of misinformation, and it's unfortunate to see this. I used to be a labor organizer in Los Angeles before I moved up to Northern California, and really, from a pretty deep level, understand and support the importance of collective bargaining, fair compensation, and all the things that unions should stand for. And I think our organization needs to and does stand for those things too. What has been disheartening to see is the types of tactics that are being used in this campaign against MCE that really are nothing less than extortion. And they're based on misinformation, and they do not reflect the values of the original folks working in the labor movement. And it almost makes a mockery of that movement. I'm really sad to see that.
Could I just say something? I don't know what is going to happen with 2145. And I don't know what it's going to end up looking like if it gets to the governor's desk. But if it gets there, I think it's going to give him more pause. And if we've got prevailing wage policy in place, I just think it inoculates us from that attack, false as it may be. Another strand of our conversation was, I told him, the development of CCA is actually going to increase line work because the interconnection work that's going to be needed to be done in order to facilitate distributed power, and the whole improvement in infrastructure that's going to be required to do that, so that we actually could be creating new living wage jobs, or even prevailing wage jobs, I should say. But I mean, we did pretty well in the Senate, and it bodes pretty well for what this bill is going to look like. But in Sacramento, it's kind of hard to predict the outcome of legislation. And my feeling is this is just a good way to protect our agency from that kind of attack as we go forward. And so, if we can adopt a policy to do that, I would strongly urge us to do it.
I just want to say that I think we have, I know this has been extremely stressful on you all and a tremendous amount of work, but the good and the bad is that because MCE has been so successful, I think that's what's brought this out. If you all were not as successful, we wouldn't be experiencing this. So for a lot of reasons, they've chosen these types of PR tactics to come after this group and to try and limit what they can do in the future. But I think whether it's more complete minutes or adopting something in a formal way that we already do, and you can put out in a release that it's something we already do, but we formally adopted it. Anything we can do to help diminish the tactics that they're going to continue to use is beneficial and can only improve our situation. So I don't see any reason not to consider it.
Director
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question. I was just curious where the actual verbiage came from. That was kind of a, I don't know if this is the proposed policy here or not. Is this a fairly standard industry statement, or is this something that we created, or where did it come from?
Yeah, it's a compilation of things, and this language is something that our staff really had drafted last fall, because we were working on what we wanted to have in our open season documents that went out in February. And this language here is what was included in the open season that was distributed in late January or February. But some of it is taken from what other utilities in the state use, and we also looked at the kind of the local hiring requirements in Richmond and pulled some language out of that as well. So we did a bit of a survey to see what is out there in this sector, and kind of looked at best practices and pulled this together.
Okay, is this anything that has legal requirements associated with it that needs to be reviewed by the lawyers to make sure that it's consistent with employment laws?
Yes, it's gone through internal legal review, but not in great depth, and we wanted to, we plan to do more of that as we get more input from y'all, because we weren't sure if it was going to change a whole lot, but it has been through that one or two.
Yeah, before, Bob, I want to get to you, but Don, just to be clear, our current practice that's reflected here is to ask for information from potential contractors about what they do. I think what's being proposed here, if I'm not mistaken, is a little bit more. That is, should we require prevailing wage, or in the verbiage of the PUC, reasonable efforts to do prevailing wage. So it is different.
Yep, I agree. I think that this is language that is rather open-ended and could be we could be more prescriptive in the process if we need to.
Right. So the question is, as a matter of policy, and frankly, I completely agree with you about the misinformation that's being perpetrated out there, and I'm viewing it less from the political standpoint, because look, if we're right and we need to stand up, so be it. But there are some important policy issues here. I happen to personally think it's a good policy to pay prevailing wage, notwithstanding the politics of it. So that's kind of how I'm evaluating it, but I think it's important for directors to know that we would be moving in a different direction by requiring that, as opposed to just asking for information about it. So Bob?
Well, I was just going to ask Larry on his one point of, it would certainly be beneficial if we had something formal acted on before the governor has to sign AB 2045. If it gets that far, since we don't have an August board meeting, that's really not even practical, is it?
That's correct. The signing needs to happen, I believe, by August 30th.
Is that true, or is it October?
Could be wrong.
I think it's early October. Yeah. So.
Could be in September.
Yeah.
Normally it would be September.
At
And
the end of September,
right.
Yeah, normally that's the case. It's towards the end of September.
What would be the downside if we adopted it now?
Well, I do think, I would suggest, though, that probably one of the things...
I mean, we can't do it now because it's discussion only.
Yeah, I think there is a distinction too. Let's put it this way: when we actually construct things, state law will require us to do prevailing wages on our own construction projects. But this, of course, deals with the PPAs,
Right.
which are being constructed by others.
Right.
And as Damon pointed out, the key thing here is go beyond just asking that you do this, just saying you have to do that.
Right.
But I think we want to, before adopting it, I think we want to be careful just how the language is worded. And I think that should go through a pretty more detailed legal review before you actually adopt the policy.
It would be helpful tonight to get a sense of the body, I think, is that something we'd be interested in doing? And then it could even go back through AgsCon in terms of wording.
Right.
I think, a couple other comments just to throw into the mix here. We do have, I think, a couple of examples of PLAs that are happening because of work that we're doing. The EDF project, the solar facility that's being built for us down in Kings County, 23 megawatts is being done under a PLA. And the union locals that have signed that PLA initially wrote letters of opposition to the bill at the request of us and others. And the very next day, they rescinded their letters. So I think it's clear what happened there. There were also quite a few other labor organizations that came in at the very end, just before the Energy Committee hearing in the Senate, with letters of opposition to the bill that were not in the IBEW or energy sector, but SEIU. One of the locals of SEIU came in with 52,000 members in their local, and the California Nurses Association came in with a letter of opposition, International Longshoremen's group, and a couple of others. So, we saw when we were able to really have dialogue with organizations that weren't already kind of being told to take a certain position, there's a lot of understanding of the issue and some opposition, and I think that is another thing that will be important for the governor when he's looking at this bill, because that shows it's not a pro or anti-union. There's kind of a split that's really happened there.
Yeah. So again, putting that aside, as a policy matter, I think we should decide whether it makes sense to have a prevailing wage aspect to it.
I don't have a problem with that, but I do think we need more legal analysis, and I think we want to think about the project labor agreement piece of it. There may be projects in which a project labor agreement is not necessarily a benefit, so I think making it creating encouraging project labor agreements, but perhaps not requiring them, so that there's a little flexibility, because reality never really comes in black and white. So I think it would be helpful for a little more thought and analysis into where would it be helpful for all parties to have a little flexibility, and where is it really important to have an absolute requirement.
It's worth noting that the IOUs do not have requirements in their PPAs that their vendors or their developers use PLAs. PLAs are...
But they do have prevailing wage.
Demonstrate best efforts is usually the language.
Best efforts, it's usually the language, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And prevailing wage provisions, I don't know. We need to look at that. We certainly looked at, because we wanted to use it as a template, but what we found is that it's not industry practice for the buyer to make those types of requirements. It's the developer that is the one who makes those
good point also.
But,
so,
a lot of our buyers, or our sellers, are not captive, but, we are really the principal investor in a lot of these projects, so it's not quite as arm's length as just being a vendor, I don't think. And I think it goes along with part of the growth and maturity of the agency. It just seems like we're getting a little bigger. We've got more revenue coming in. Our territory is expanding, and I think with that comes this responsibility to step up. And I do think we need to build in the flexibility. We may be building projects out in wherever where there's a dearth of union labor available.
Right.
But certainly that should be the exception and not the rule as we go forward if we do adopt this as a policy. And I agree with Damon. Personally, I think it's a better policy, it's a better thing for us to be doing as an agency, as a public agency. So, I would like to see us move forward with it in some fashion.
You're talking prevailing wage. specifically.
Prevailing wage and also the
Consideration of
project labor.
Sure,
agreements.
yeah, I mean, that's the side I think the flexibility could be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Further discussion or comments? So I think there is an interest in going forward with this, Don. Let's put an analysis together. Let's do the XCOM with due speed. There are some ancillary benefits to getting something together quickly. Although I have not formally acknowledged those reasons.
Do good things happen.
All right. But in terms of a matter of policy, it's also, I think, very well worth considering quickly.
Thank you, very helpful.
Okay, great discussion, you guys. Item 9, members of the public on that? All right. Item 9, MCE office space proposal.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to try to purposefully make mine brief. I want to start by just acknowledging some of our board directors who have helped with this process. We really appreciate the time to visit some of the spaces and your thoughtful consideration, and I'm very, very appreciative. So thank you, Kate, Damon, and Denise, very much so. So many of you know BioMarin bought this entire campus. They're in the process of taking it over. They've already started the initial phases of construction, and they are looking to free this building of all its tenants as soon as humanly possible. We have a lease that's in place until 2019, and a relocation clause that's within that lease. And so we've been working with the lead contact at BioMarin, who plans to exercise the relocation clause unless we determine it's better for us to move out. So with the considerations made that this is all happening fairly quickly, which really started in February earlier this year, we have spent the last couple of months looking at comparable office space, commercial space in the area. We've really honed in on Central San Rafael being the best fit for many, many reasons that we realize day to day in our current situation, which is close to public transportation, easy for the public to attend meetings here, close and convenient for staff to commute to work, reasonable priced office space, et cetera, et cetera. We've really honed in on 3 potential fits, well, I'll say 2 potential fits. One of them is to relocate in this building on the 3rd floor and gain a few more square footage, which we need. And then the other option is on 5th Avenue. At this time, we don't have a completely baked lease for you to review tonight and hopefully adopt. We are very close to getting there, and we're hoping that your decision tonight could really be look at the spreadsheet I provided, get a sense of the update and what our best options are, and allow consideration to delegate authority to sign the lease when we do finalize it at the July XCOM. So in a couple of weeks, which will allow us enough time to really fine-tune the very last bit details that we need to fine-tune. I will say in the last couple of weeks, some of the inkling to really consider the 5th Avenue space, which would require a major renovation, that sort of inkling has shifted quite a bit. We've realized the expense, the timeline of the construction project, and frankly, a lack of eagerness, I would say, on the part of some of the counterparties to realize what a great fit we would be for that space hasn't really come to fruition in a way we feel good about taking on. It would be a major project, and so we're leaning more closely towards relocating here. As I said, BioMarin has been very good to, they would cover all the moving costs either way, so it would be a fairly simple shift to move to this space. And we're pretty sure that within the next week, and certainly within 2 before XCOM, we would have a recommendation for you to consider in a lease. So does anybody have questions with what's on the spreadsheet I provided? I kind of buzzed through that fairly quickly. Bob?
You said you expected a recommendation within the 2 weeks, a recommendation to stay here at Lindaro?
Yes. Well, a recommendation on the lease option that we decide to go with, and I'm thinking that that would be the direction.
Yeah, I think at this time, because we don't, we have two options on the table, and we are looking to the counterparties on both sides to provide us with a compelling lease agreement, and we do not yet have something that's close enough to present to you this evening. We discussed this in XCOM at the June Executive Committee meeting, and talked about the different options, and it was suggested that we might be able to finalize a lease agreement in time for the July Executive Committee meeting, knowing that we still were a few weeks away from getting finally with the campground. So I think it's fair to say that there could be a recommendation to go to either location, but as Emily articulated really well, the counterparty for the 5th Street location has not been moving quickly and has not provided us with the materials that we've needed in order to move that along expeditiously. So at that point, because of that, it's looking like moving to this location will be the most logical step. And Byron has asked us to notify them within the next 4 to 6 weeks. So it's necessary that we be able to get it down soon.
If I can add a little more detail.
Would it be month to month here?
No.
How long?
Well, actually, I mean, it could be whenever we're ready to leave. When we find, actually, that speaks to a point I was going to bring up, is that in this process, we realize it's really not a renter's market right now. A lot of that due to the evacuation of this huge campus into central San Rafael for many companies. So there's not a whole lot of opportunity right now to get things that we want, and I think that is the truth. That's what we're hearing, and it seems to be materializing that way, certainly with the 5th Street space. In a couple of years, maybe a year, 2 years, while I probably wouldn't be looking forward to another move, it could be the market flattens enough that it's a really opportune time for us to consider moving, and we get the deal that we want for the price we want and all the amenities included, and it would be worth our while. So to your point, month to month, I don't know, but I'm sure BioMarin would be more than happy to see us go whenever we're ready. Just cost-effective wise to do another move within even 1 calendar year, I think would be not wise. And plus, I don't think the market will level out within that time frame.
And I think that's one reason why the 5th Street location has been of interest to us, because ultimately BioMarin is wanting to take over the space, and so moving to a place where we expect we'd be able to stay indefinitely is attractive. But we need it to be the right place, and so that's where the challenge is.
What about the age?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of simple-minded here, and in front of me I have a piece of paper with 3 options.
Mm-hmm.
And the 750 Lindaro says the term is 5 years with a 4-year option. It doesn't say we have to be out in 2 years or less or in a few months. And then there's a 990 A Street option, which it sounds like isn't really an option. So could we just kind of start back at the beginning?
Sure. So we started looking in Central Marin. The place that you all visited is the 5th Street place, which is what we've really been having our eye on for the last month. In the process, we looked at places all over San Rafael. 990A was one of the closer contenders, but requires a huge renovation project, larger than the one that 5th Street would require. It's really been...
So you're not presenting this as an options for us. This is just a description of what you did.
Well, these are options, as in we've had proposals submitted. So the negotiation of lease language has already taken place. Okay. What we found is, so in the beginning, yeah, it is an option. I would color that statement with...
It's a really bad option.
It doesn't look like the best option. And it really is, I think, helpful, and maybe, I'm welcome to the feedback, obviously, but it's allowed us just comparative, sort of terms to know what's out there. it's a huge undertaking. It's far less expensive, but that's obvious because of the space itself. And again, it really is a matter of the balancing act of the timing. So the timing that we'd have to relocate anyways, we have to be out of the Lincoln Street space by the end of the calendar year. He could exercise the relocation within 90 days, and he's been kind enough, I guess, is the way you'd say it, to allow that to extend through the end of the calendar year, which we're grateful for. So in doing that, that's really driven our decision-making process, and the reality of the construction is just not something I think that can happen within the time frame of the end of the calendar year. Even with any contingency that we might consider staying here longer, I don't see that as a feasible option. The 5th Street, again, major lift, a lot of opportunity. I think a month ago, if we would have had more of an eagerness and a commitment and a problem solving and frankly, a hungriness from a realtor to make it fit for us. We were going to take the whole building and be a long-term tenant. I'm just really at a loss to understand why that hasn't transpired in the last few weeks, and it's making it very hard to stay committed to that option. The price isn't even that compelling at this point. What we've seen them come back with plans-wise is it's not really, it's unsatisfactory, really. So it's sort of at the last, as I said, last 2 weeks, last week even, we've really focused on Lindaro as being the best fit for now.
And can you do a 5 year?
Yeah, well, we can stay through 2019. And he's even offered to extend that to 2023 because the other tenant on the 3rd floor is there through 2023. So that floor can't be occupied by Biomarin staff, and that's really the strategy. They're trying to vacate floors of each each building one at a time, and then move Biomarin, staff as soon as possible. So I think that we'll be in a better opportunity. Yeah, we'll know a lot more in the next, obviously, week or two. And I appreciate your patience with not having something fully baked for you tonight, but this is a huge ordeal for us. And we want to make sure we don't make any rash decisions. It's a big lift. We want to find the best place. And this option allows us to keep our base rent the same that we have now, which is also, I think, pretty darn fair, seeing as though we signed that in December 2012.
Gary.
Yeah, how much space do we have now?
We have just shy of 5,000 square feet,
Okay, so we're basically assuming no growth in terms of...
Slightly, yeah. We actually...
I think the 5,600, that's 10% growth.
Yeah, and we had actually asked for 6,000 to 6,500 square feet just when we were doing our initial search, just thinking we could build in room for growth, additional staff, maybe another conference room the size to allow for our committee meetings, and have one vacant for our staff meetings as well. So we were looking for a bit more space. 5,600 works for us. We've known how to be efficient and pretty lean, so we're used to that, and we can make good use of our space, but it does allow room for growth, which is great. We need it.
I'm just thinking 10, 15 years down the line, if we're active in 4 different counties and
yeah, and who's to
picking up
say,
and growing that, I'm just wondering, I don't know, I didn't go into the numbers of growth required with each additional jurisdiction, but I'm just wondering if we need to be thinking a little bit further out.
yeah, and geographically speaking, I mean, yeah, literally further out from our headquarters here, and who's to say consideration of satellite presence isn't,
I think one of the things that we like about the staying put in this building is that they are eager ultimately to have us move out, and so I think it gives us a lot of flexibility with finding a space at the time that we need it, and that is the size that we need it. So I think while we don't know today what our needs are going to be in 2 or 3 years, we'll know in 2 or 3 years. And then at that time, there will be less desire in downtown Santa Fe, we think, because it won't be a situation where a lot of tenants are leaving this Marin building looking for space nearby.
Or maybe you'll need a satellite office in Fairfield. I don't know. Okay.
and hopefully they'll honor our moving costs and relocation costs at our new place, like they've said they would do for us now. So they're very eager to say bye, but they're being fair and have been, I mean, I gotta say, the best people to work with so far, which is sort of ironic.
Kevin?
I just was, without commenting on the merits of any of these proposals, just curious what consideration, if any, was given to locations outside central Santa Fe.
Yeah, we did. We started in Central Marin, really just because of the Richmond Bridge location, proximity for staff commuting, proximity for representation from our board all over the county. It kind of makes sense that way. We have a lot of the sort of core criteria, which is, public transportation, easy for walking distance to shops and restaurants, easy central location for board and public. And what we found is while the price was a lot cheaper if you go a very short distance, either direction, north, south, or east, or not south, sorry, correct me on that one, east or to some of the northern locations that we're in, they are really far away from all the things that make Central San Rafael so compelling for staff and the public and our business operations close to Richmond. So we did search quite a bit.
We looked quite a bit in the Larkspur Landing area because
I was going to ask.
yeah. More expensive?
More expensive?
Yes.
Well, you looked at Nevada too, didn't you?
We did, yeah. And I think there the concern was at the transit hub that we're close to here. We actually have quite a few staff that use buses to get here. And so that was a significant factor. And then, of course, one other thing that is worth mentioning is ADA accessibility is a requirement we need to adhere to, and having meeting space close by. That isn't an option with quite a few office spaces large enough for a board meeting.
Okay, so you're going to come back 2 weeks. You said 2 weeks.
At the July XCOM.
Okay.
You need a motion to defer this to XCOM, don't you?
Yeah, delegate authority.
Or we need to delegate authority to XCOM to approve the lease agreement.
Okay.
Second.
Public, before we forget.
I think it's a good idea.
Got a motion and second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, so none carried. Okay, so we'll take that up in XCOM. Item 10, energy efficiency update.
Good evening. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Megan Doran, and I'm the Energy Efficiency Specialist at MCE. Tonight, I'm going to give you updates on our San Rafael Chamber of Commerce outreach campaign, the My Energy Tool user interface redesign, our new partnership with Populous, and an update on the Peace Bill as requested, as well as some information on the en banc that we attended at the CPUC this month. We're conducting an outreach campaign with the Green Committee of the San Rafael Chamber, and as well as Smart Lights, to encourage San Rafael businesses to not only complete assessments, but complete energy efficiency upgrade projects. The Chamber has approximately 600 members, and we've been targeting them for the past few weeks through digital communications, e-newsletters, e-blasts, event calendars, social media, and various other channels through the Chamber's website. The campaign starts next week and will run through mid-August, depending on how many assessments and projects we get committed. The Smart Lights team will be assessing and canvassing businesses in all around San Rafael on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 to 4 p.m. So if you have a business in San Rafael and you'd like to schedule an assessment, please let us know. The Green Committee has volunteered to make calls to the 100 most hard-to-reach businesses of their membership. And those are places like lawyers' offices, dentist offices, banks, anyone who doesn't really enjoy people coming in and asking them to do anything. Smart Lights has a really ambitious target for this outreach campaign of convincing or converting 20% of the membership to complete energy assessment or energy projects. We've developed a property profile, which is in your packet. Found self-storage in boxes in San Rafael completed an upgrade project not too long ago, and this tells their story as well as provides business owners with the bottom line of what the costs look like, what the savings look like, and et cetera. Systems is completing, rebuilding the My Energy tool pretty much from the ground up, and we're really, really excited about what we've seen so far. It's a complete user interface redesign. It will dramatically improve the ease of use of the tool, as well as attract and retain more users. Last Friday...
Has that been based on some kind of feedback?
Oh, I was just getting to that. Last Friday, Planet Ecosystem held a usability review with 10 people in San Francisco, and our very own Jamie Tuckey also attended. There was, the new user interface was very well received. There will be additional adjustments made based on that feedback as well. They've gone through a lot of iterations with their, they've hired a subcontractor, a web design firm to work with, and they've worked with our team extensively on really getting this right. The new design is set to release in early fall, and as soon as that's released, they will Planet Ecosystems will also be launching a marketing campaign in order to drive people to the tool. We've developed a partnership with Populous, and Populous currently runs the Home Upgrade Advisor service. It's a phone line, and they answer homeowners' questions on residential upgrades, anything EV related that homeowners are concerned with. They support the interest and help facilitate energy efficiency project completion through the Home and Advanced Home Upgrade program. And they've also been referring and making customers aware of our Green Home Loan program. And we've really been satisfied with the awareness that has been created through them. So customers can actually just choose if they want to receive this service through the My Energy tool, and then Populous will have access to customer information if they're interested in completing home upgrades, if they're using high energy, anything related to that. Populous will get the data from PEI, and then Populous reaches out to the customers and lets them know. So the real intention of this partnership is for Populous to provide deeper engagement to our customers around the home utility reports, around the My Energy tool, and really encourage and generate awareness around the Green Home Loans program. HR 4285, the Pace Protection Act of 2014. So I guess you guys had some questions last month, and Becky asked me to provide you with an update on this bill. So a little bit of background. California First is available in most jurisdictions. I know specifically Larkspur, Novato, San Rafael, and the County of Marin. FHFA had rejected CAFTA's previous proposal, which was a $10 million loan loss reserve that would mitigate any risk for lenders. So the HR 4285 allows PACE programs to continue by directing FHFA to rescind its earlier guidance regarding these programs. This bill requires stringent underwriting standards, ensuring homeowners are able to afford the assessments before giving them the loans. This protects Fannie and Freddie from their financial risks. This bill also supports local governments in achieving their economic and environmental needs in their communities. Currently, the bill needs additional bipartisan support in order to get it out of committee and get a hearing to have it voted on. Last week, Becky and I attended an en banc at the CPUC. It was convened by Commissioner Peavy in order to analyze the future of energy efficiency. There was a lot of discussion around the 2016 rolling portfolio cycle, and the consensus being that the longer cycles would allow for continuous improvement in programs, as well as to better serve our customers. Another focus was on creating better evaluation, measurement, and verification procedures and policies. And the final point worth noting is that the program should start shifting to a broader base as opposed to the deeper, more comprehensive program designs that a lot of energy efficiency programs currently have. To conclude the day, the Commissioner Peavy let us know that he was disappointed that he had not heard any ideas for radical change in designing new programs. Any questions?
I don't have a question, it's really a comment. You know, I think this, the update on the multifamily pipeline in the report is really great.
Yeah, and I could even add to that we had another interest this week from the workshop we held in Richmond last week around our 2016 program planning. So we're really excited. They're a cool project, and we're hoping we'll get to work with them.
That's great. I mean, the number of units involved, and energy savings of 15% and water savings of 70% in the projects that were completed at Oakview and Monte Vista apartments. That's really good. So
yeah.
This is great. It seems like all of a sudden things have really moved.
Yeah, in the last couple of weeks, we've had 7 new applications come into the program. Next week, I'm going to be out in the field 2 whole days conducting 4 assessments with our technical partners, and then we have one scheduled for the following week as well.
Fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Good job, Megan.
Thank you.
Further questions for Megan? Comments? Members of the public? Okay, well, thank you for that update, Megan. Appreciate it. Item 11, communications update.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. All right, I'm going to just jump right into my presentation. I'm not sure how many of you are Deep Green customers, but if you are, you would have received either an email or a mail packet in the last week or two. It included a variety of things, and it's something that we send out to our Deep Green customers in June every year. It's required through our certification with Green E Energy. Green E is basically the nation's leader in verification for renewable energy programs, for voluntary renewable energy programs. And of course, Deep Green is Green E certified. And so as part of that certification, Green E requires that we provide annual customer notifications. And so we sent those out by the 30th to all of our Deep Green customers, and they included a couple of documents. There was our price, terms, and conditions, so that every year we remind our Deep Green customers what the Deep Green product is all about, how much they're paying for it. We include a product content label, and that tells our customers where our Deep Green energy is coming from. It's 100% wind. And we also included a cover letter for all of our customers and use that as an opportunity to tell our Deep Green customers about the new Soul Shares program that we're offering, so we're really excited about that. And also to remind them that since they're Deep Green customers, half of the premium that they're spending on Deep Green is being invested in the development of local renewable energy programs. So we've gotten a lot of good feedback and a lot of activity since we mailed that out. You guys also heard that in June, and you probably all received these, that we mailed out the joint cost comparison and power content mailers with PG&E. And so we tracked activity over the last month to see how those mailers had impacted our customers. And what we found was that our Deep Green enrollments quadrupled this month, which is pretty cool. So we had over 90 Deep Green enrollment requests, representing over 137 accounts. There's more accounts than requests because I might have 5 different meters and I want to sign them all up with Deep Green. Our light green enrollments also tripled, which is pretty cool. So when I'm talking about light green, for this bullet, I'm specifically referencing customers who had decided at one point that they didn't want to be with MCE and opted out to stay entirely with PG&E. And in the last month, they changed their mind and contacted us and asked if they could have light green. We also had 46 Soul Shares inquiries, and that wasn't including the 5 or so that we got today. They've been flooding in, actually, since we sent out the Deep Green notification to our customers. We have, I think at the end of today, we had about 38 customers who are on the waiting list to get Soul Shares when that's available. So it was a really great...
They're all from Ross, right?
They're scattered
I think there's more from Fairfax.
So we'll be continuing to follow up with those customers, and it was a good week. I mean, a good month as far as customer activity.
We have also been working on a variety of customer service enhancements. The first I wanted to let you know about is related to our call center. We've updated, or we're in the process of updating our call center system so that if by some off chance someone is going to have to wait on hold for 5 minutes or more, we now have the savvy technology that says your hold time is estimated to be 5 minutes. Do you want us to call you back so you don't have to waste your precious time sitting on hold with us? So they can choose that option. We can call them back at whatever number they want, and they can choose a specified time, or they can just be called back as soon as there's no more wait time. We are also, so when customers call our call center and they opt out during office hours, which is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, if you select the option to opt out, you always go to a person and you get to make that request over the phone. Which is a good opportunity for us to find out why people are opting out, and also for us to answer any questions that people might have. But when our call center is closed right now, we would ask them to call back during regular business hours. And so we are going to be implementing an automated system during, when our office hours are closed, so that customers can punch in their account number and opt out that way. It's also worth noting that, for example, for last year, half the year, our call center was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to take opt-out requests. And that's because when we do any enrollment period for any new communities, we make sure we have people there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to talk to them. We also have a new and improved website. So you might remember we had a contract with Marin Web Design that you all approved a few months ago. And we released the new and improved website about maybe 3 weeks ago. So I've included a couple of snapshots of the website, but I'd love for you all to take a look at it whenever you have a chance and just provide any candid feedback that you might have about the content or the user experience. We can continue to improve it all the time. This is the homepage. We've got our micro-documentary videos displayed throughout the website, which is really nice. Just a couple of different slides to show you the versatility of the site. This is actually on the homepage, and it's hard to see right there, but there's this gray part. It says Get in Touch, and it's a direct email sort of tool that's on our website. And we've always had this general email, info@mcecleanenergy.org, that people could use to email us. And we get emails all the time. But as soon as we launched this website and now have that little option on every page of the site, we're getting flooded with emails, which I think is really great, because the more direct contact we have with customers, the stronger relationships we can build, and the more information that we can give them. So our team has been really busy responding to those emails. Our call center is also now helping to respond to those emails, so that was a good result of the revised site. These are just a couple of other pages working on simplifying the solar information for our customers. We've added a new page just on electric vehicles, and this was a photo from from an electric vehicle charging station that we provided funding for the installation at a San Rafael parking lot. So it's a fun picture. For our website, in addition to ongoing maintenance and minor improvements, we have a few key next steps that we'll be taking over the next couple of months. The first is to do what we did to the English site with our Spanish site. So right now, the Spanish site is still live, it's being used, but it hasn't been revised with a new look. And we're working on doing that right now. You guys probably are also very well aware that we have two different websites. So we've got the MCEcleanenergy.org, which is really our customer-facing site. It's what we use on all of our advertisements, opt-out notices, brochures, everything. And then we have marincleanenergy.org, and we've been using that to house our board and administrative information. But we think that there's an opportunity to merge those and still make all of the information easily accessible. And I think it'll make the end user more happy not to have to go to two sites, maybe all of you in particular. So we're working on merging those sites, and of course before that happens, you guys will all be well informed so that you're not wondering where your regulatory packets might be. And then the third option, or the third thing that we're going to be working on for the website is doing an online chat functionality. So I'm really excited about that, but you have probably been to websites before where there's a little pop-up that says, need help? You know, Jamie's here to help. And so you can talk to them and do direct chat online. So that'll be a really cool thing to add to our website. Our call center will help with that. And then our internal staff, as we're available, if there's ever a slow time in the day, they can log on and help people directly on our website. And I know everybody knows about the 2014 Marin County Fair. You know, a few of you were there today, which is great. And this year, the fair's theme is that it's the happiest fair on earth. And let's not forget that it's the greenest. And we are a major sponsor of the fair this year. So I've got just a couple of photos to show you in case you don't make it out. I hope that you all do. We are sponsoring the solar-powered carousel. So that's the carousel with our sign. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but those are the solar panels with another sign with our logo, indicating that we're helping support that. There's a solar-powered stage that we're sponsoring as well. And again, it's a little bit difficult to see here, but if you're in person, it's really big and clear. And there's a girl on stage with a nice big audience with our sign in the background, advertising our energy efficiency programs. We are, you guys probably remember the little train that runs around through the fair, and we've got, it's also difficult to see in this photo, so I apologize. But there are signs all over the train about MCE, about our lower rates, our local jobs, our energy savings programs, and of course our renewable energy. And then we have a booth at the very front entrance of the fair. So if you guys go into the fair at the front, we're the very first booth on the right. We're sharing that with the County of Marin. And this year's theme for us at the fair is about energy efficiency. And that's why we're sharing this booth with the county, because they're also really pushing all of the energy efficiency programs. So we're excited to be out there talking to people and answering questions and getting them excited about their energy use. We also got to put an advertisement in the Marin County Fair magazine. That's the one on the right. And the picture on the left is actually a sign that is in the fair exhibit hall. It's in a couple of places in the exhibit hall, and it's basically showing off the fact that they are powered with solar energy, and all of the remaining electricity that they need comes from our deep green 100% renewable.
So Jamie, I know that you know that that picture on the left, as beautiful as it is not the exhibit hall that has the solar panels on it. So, right? So it says on the roof of this building, not so much.
Well, it's on the roof of the building that the sign is in. That's good. But, yes, that is a very good point. And you know what? We actually did go back to this sign to refresh the numbers, because the greenhouse gas reductions change, right, as PG&E's emissions change, and we always want to be accurate. So because of that, we'll have the opportunity to change it again. Cool. And we'll swap out the photo.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So what's up next for the public affairs team? Since I won't see you next month, I just wanted to let you know about some of the things that we're working on. You all should have received emails in the last couple of days from some of our staff letting you know that, well, not letting you know, asking if you would like to include any information on your community websites about MCE. A lot of your cities and towns in the county already has information, but some of them don't. We think it's a good idea, if you're interested, to include basic information about MCE, since it is a local public program and it's being offered to your constituents because your council decided that it was a choice that you wanted them to have. So we're circulating information. If you're interested in posting any information on your website, we'd love to have you follow up with us, and we can help you with next steps. Going back to the micro-documentaries videos that we have been airing at the last couple of meetings, right now we are working on negotiating a contract with Comcast to do an ad campaign with 30-second spots of those videos, so those 2-minute videos shortened down to 30 seconds in the Marin County zone. What we're looking at right now is probably a campaign that would air for about 7 weeks. And the reason that we're limiting it to Marin County this time around is just because of the geographical constraints of television advertising. For example, if we added Richmond, it would also include about 8 other East Bay cities that we don't provide service in. So at the time being, it's not a financially appealing or really even it's not really an opportunity that's appealing to customer service either, since we'd be advertising in communities that we don't serve.
Jamie?
Yes.
Are you negotiating particular times of day that those ads are going to show at
Yes.
Comcast? Because otherwise they love to put everything in about 2
Yeah.
a.m.
So I didn't really get into detail on this because we're still working on it, but it's particular times of day and it's particular television shows.
Great.
And it's prime time, and we're also, we're being strategic about it to target specific audience that have been, shown to be the decisions on, their utility bills and things of that nature. So all that detail hasn't been completely finalized. They've given us an initial proposal, and we're working on fine-tuning it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I think that, in the next couple of months, the time is really right to do a print ad campaign throughout our service area. We have so many amazing things to highlight, and we want our customers to know about those, and how else are they going to do it if we don't tell them. So some of the things that we'd like our print ad campaign to highlight are the savings on the electric bills, similar to that ad that I just showed, where people were, our customers were saving $5.9 million advertising for Soul Shares. Letting people know about all of the new local projects that we have in the pipeline, which is so exciting to see. Talking about greenhouse gas reductions, of course, our energy efficiency programs, and local jobs.
At prevailing wages.
And prevailing wages. So,
thanks.
Any questions? No? I hope you have a happy 4th and make it to the fair.
Okay, item 12, regulatory and legislative
Great.
Which would you like to do first?
We can do either first. Maybe I'll go ahead with the bill, get that out of the way. So on the legislative front, the main focus for the last month since our last board meeting has been AB 2145, and there's been some significant movement on that bill and significant changes to that bill. I expect many of you are aware of a lot that has happened, so I won't spend too much time on this. I'm happy to answer questions if folks want more detail. But this bill, after making its way through the Assembly, went over to the Senate side, and its first stop was the Energy Committee on the Senate side, which had 11 members of the Senate on it. The date of that hearing was June 23rd, so it was just a week ago from Monday. And leading up to that hearing, there was a lot of activity happening, both from MCE staff and board members, but also from a lot of other external organizations. This bill has created a humongous grassroots movement around CCA across the state, which has been really exciting to see. Some of the efforts that we were involved in were meetings with each of the committee members. We met with each of the offices multiple times with the staff and with the senators themselves in many cases. We provided written material. We kind of became a fact sheet production house in the last month. We weighed heavily upon what's been called in the Assembly hearing. There apparently is an MCE PR machine, and which I think is sitting over here beside us. The MCE PR machine got very busy helping make our fact sheets look really beautiful and easy and clear to read, and I think that really helped get accurate information into the hands of the people that needed to get that accurate information. So huge kudos to our PR machine on that. We also were involved in a little bit of discussions around potential amendments that really got floated at the very last few days leading up to the hearing. As many of you have heard, the potential amendments that were floated, actually before I get to that, I should also say that during the last couple weeks leading up to the hearing, we continue to get a huge number of opposing letters from various organizations around the state of California, including the labor organizations I mentioned before, but many cities and towns, folks that provide power to MCE were writing letters of opposition. Many environmental organizations signed on in opposition to the bill. And all in all, I think there were over 230 organizations ultimately on the list of opposing entities, and over about 30,000 individuals that signed a petition opposing the bill. So there was a lot of activity in the meeting rooms of all of these committee members, and we could tell that, you know, in the last week leading up to the hearing, when we would go in, they would sort of roll their eyes and say, yeah, this is all we've been hearing about for the last 3 weeks. You know, we know the issue. And the committee members were, I think, hearing loud and clear that the opt-in provision was really the biggest problem. And they were concerned about the opt-in provision. And so I think there was a lot of pressure placed on committee members to get rid of that provision. And so on the Friday before the hearing, that language was proposed to be taken out of the bill, and the analysis by the committee chair's staff included a recommendation along those lines. And on the day of the hearing, the author, Bradford is the author of the bill, agreed to accept that amendment. Kind of as a quid pro quo, as they framed it, they wanted to, while taking out the opt-in provision, they wanted to impose a geographic limitation on CCAs, which didn't seem to have any logical basis. Didn't seem to stem from some of the original concerns raised by the supporters, but nonetheless, it was thrown into the bill as language that would apply to CCAs, and it was originally proposed that the limitation be for CCAs to only serve in one county. That language was being floated on Monday, and many of the grassroots folks and others that were involved in the movement against this bill spoke pretty strongly against the one county limitation, and were pushing for something bigger, more like a 2, 3, 4, 5 county limitation or no limitation. And many of the comments in the hearing were focused on that piece, because the opt-in had been removed at the beginning of the hearing. So I think that the big picture takeaway from the day of the hearing, having the opt-in provision removed, was just a tremendous win for all CCAs in the state, and we're just so thrilled that that was the outcome that we saw. I think that a lot of the folks that spend their days working in Sacramento were really surprised to see that type of outcome, with considering the folks that MCE and the CCA movement was really up against. We were really fighting against a couple of entities that typically get what they want in the legislation, and so it was a really big win, I think, to get that language removed. For those of you that were watching the hearing, I think it's worth explaining that the initial votes that were cast right after the item was heard did change during about a 2-hour period. And what can happen in these committees is the hearing is held open until all items in the hearing have been closed, and the call for a vote happened at the close of the meeting, giving folks an opportunity to vote again or change their vote, and that did happen in a couple of cases. At the time that the final vote happened, the author was proposing a 3-county restriction rather than a 1-county restriction, and I think that was an effort to prevent the bill from getting killed, because at the beginning, the first vote, there weren't enough votes to pass the bill off the floor, or off the committee. In the end, they did get the 6 votes that they needed, with the 3-county restriction being added in. So the bill was not killed, but it moved out of committee with those amendments being taken. Just yesterday morning, we received the write-up on the amendments, and those were circulated to you all today. And because they're kind of lengthy, I'm just going to highlight the couple of things that are noteworthy in there. I think, first of all, committee staff did a fair job of writing up what was intended by the committee. I don't think there was anything done to use a different approach than what the committee seemed to be voicing a wish for. There is a 3-county limitation now in the amended bill, so any CCAs would be required to not grow beyond a 3-county contiguous border. So CCAs wouldn't be able to leapfrog around. They would only be able to expand in a contiguous way and only to within a 3-county limit. There was grandfathering language inserted to account for MCE, who, because we are already in the process of helping communities to enroll, that would put us beyond that 3-county limit. There was grandfathering language included that said any city or county that has passed an ordinance to join an existing CCA program before the end of this calendar year would be grandfathered in and would be subjected to the 3-county requirement. But after that time, that requirement would apply. There are 2 other provisions that remain in the bill. They were part of the initial language and have not been removed, and these are provisions that we are concerned about, that we've been concerned about from the beginning. Our concern of these 2 issues was dwarfed by the opt-in provision, so we weren't as vocal about it at the beginning, but I'll explain what they are. The first is a requirement that CCAs provide a 5-year rate forecast in every piece of correspondence that is sent out to customers to solicit their interest. So what that means is a little bit vague. It seems to be tied to the enrollment notices or the opt-out notices that we send around when we're enrolling customers, but it would probably also be tied to the joint cost comparisons. Potentially it would be tied to the joint cost comparisons that we send around. It is not a requirement of the IOUs, however, in this legislation. So they would not be required to provide 5-year rate projections to customers. It is unclear whether the rate projections would be binding. That's a concern, of course, as well. So just to make it clear why that's a problem, it's really not possible to forecast what rates are going to be 5 years in advance. For example, we don't know what hydroelectric conditions are going to be. If we've purchased hydroelectric power, we don't know exactly how much we're going to be getting at that price. We do procurement on throughout the year, every year. We've hedged a lot of our power supply and costs. We certainly haven't hedged all of it. We don't know what usage is going to be on a year-to-year basis. So it's really not possible to have an accurate rate projection. What that means is that this would be a legislative mandate for us to provide this information to customers, and that's not going to make customers very happy. If they receive information that is wrong, they're going to be dissatisfied, and that dissatisfaction will be directed at the CCA that's providing that information. So it's very problematic, and this is a provision that we think needs to be struck or severely modified. And we're working on a few scenarios for amendments that could be workable if the provision isn't just struck outright. The second issue that remains in the bill is the requirement that the IOUs or any party be able to file a complaint under the expedited complaint procedure process that was built into a statute through SB 790 for IOUs. And the expedited complaint process was something that was intended to level the playing field and ensure that if IOUs were not cooperating with CCAs in the way that they should be, that there could be an expedited process for the CPUC to deal with that. This is kind of turning the idea on its head, saying that a complaint could be filed against a CCA. Well, the regulatory body, or the oversight body for a CCA is our board, not the CPUC, because our board we are a public body and we have public oversight already. So creating this new regulatory layer of oversight isn't appropriate, and it's problematic. With this one, we think there are some simple amendments that could correct the language and make it workable by limiting it to the service agreement that we have in place with PG&E and having that be where the oversight
could be appropriate, could be relevant, but beyond that, we think that the language needs to be struck, or at least not be so broad. So those are the two remaining provisions. I think there's still a lot of concern in the grassroots community among cities and towns across the state regarding the 3-county limitation. I think the reason there's concern there is it's hard to start a CCA, and so creating new limitations around CCAs probably isn't great policy for a state that's looking to achieve dramatic EB32 GHG reductions and more renewables. For small counties that would have small loads to aggregate and do procurement for, having a 3-county limitation really could prevent them from being able to move forward on a CCA program. So I know that's an issue that many groups are going to be continuing to push hard on as this bill works its way through the Senate. The next stop for this bill is appropriations. That is expected to occur sometime in the first 2 weeks of August, but the date has not yet been set. It will be right after the legislative recess. And then the bill will also need to go back to the Assembly side for a concurrence vote because it's been amended. And of course, it will need to go to a floor vote on the Senate and on the Assembly side before it goes to the governor's desk. So that is my overview. Happy to answer any questions.
Kevin.
Just real quick, you alluded before when we were teeing up the conversation earlier in the meeting about the use of the phrasing enacting ordinances to allow expansion of multiple counties. And it does seem, just glancing through the bill, that there's ambiguity in the way language and where those references are made, because they're made in a couple of different places.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's talking about adopting an ordinance within a county. Sometimes there's talking about an entity adopting an ordinance to serve as a community choice indicator. That seems kind of sketchy to me, and I'm just wondering. I understand you all have a view on how far you can push the envelope on that language, but is there some interest in maybe getting some clarification as the bill continues?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and maybe I'd love to follow up with you all offline and find out what you're seeing here. I think there are two scenarios where there's discussion about CCAs providing service in other communities, and so that might be what you're seeing there, that there's some language that relates to a CCA itself expanding, and then there's also language that allows for a CCA or allows for a city or county to delegate authority to a CCA to operate their program for them. And in that paragraph, the grandfathering language doesn't show up there. I think that's okay because that doesn't apply to us. But maybe you're seeing something different. So
I'm not sure what I'm saying. That's part of the concern that I have.
Yeah, I think we're at the stage now where
the one that I was kind of looking at.
We don't have page numbers, but
it's section
12A.
It's 12A and B.
Section 266.
Yeah, is that what it is?
Is it referring just literally to the county?
366.
Yeah.
Or is it a city?
I read it the first time, it sounds like if you're already serving a city that's outside your contiguous counties, you can continue to serve them. But it doesn't necessarily say you can go after other jurisdictions in that county, in the 4th county.
Right.
And that was the
yeah.
Correct.
that was the issue I raised earlier. I don't.
Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation. I think that the first sentence, or it's actually the second sentence in that paragraph, is referring to a situation where a CCA has not expanded to a city or county, but is providing service, like through delegated authority, providing CCA service to that community. So I think that's a different situation than what's addressed at the very end of the paragraph through the new language, but I will...
Look like the grandfather clause.
Yeah.
Yeah, the grandfathering clause is at the end.
Yeah, and so that's why I was concerned about that.
Yeah, no, and it seems like...
Because I read it, it doesn't say what you interpret.
Yeah, no, reading it plainly, you would not be able to expand in the 4th county, even though one city within that county had an ordinance prior.
Which would be interesting for us if we were in 4 counties, which of the 3 are we allowed to expand in?
I think the difference is that first
piece, which is in the second sentence, says act as the community choice aggregator,
Yeah.
rather than really expanding membership to a community choice aggregator. But it's definitely a good idea to look at that one closely.
Yeah, I think there might be conflicting language with that more dangerous interpretation in the beginning where it specifies the JPA and has the grandfathering language in the JPA, and I think that's more favorable. Because there are sort of two models. There's the JPA could expand
Right.
what we've been doing,
Right.
or a city could request MCE be the aggregator for that city and not actually join MCE.
Right.
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 And I think they're talked about differently in here, but I think maybe it's not perfect.
Yeah. So we don't want to have language that could be misinterpreted.
Well, and also, if it is going to get cleaned up, we want to push a cleanup that is most accommodating to our interests.
Yeah, thanks.
Damon educated me a little bit last week about how bills progress in Sacramento, which apparently is different than Washington, D.C., but I just want to make sure my understanding is correct. If this current bill, without the opt-in change we don't like, were to pass the Senate, when it goes back to the Assembly, unlike Washington, D.C., I take it doesn't go to a conference committee where the opt-in gets put back in. The Assembly just has to vote up or down on what the Senate came up with.
That's my understanding, but it does have to go to the same committees it went to.
But it's just on concurrence. It's not revisited.
There's no such thing as conference committees in Sacramento.
Interesting. On the budget, that's it.
So is PG&E still actively supporting this, even though the opt-out or opt-in part is out? But because of the contiguous thing, limiting expansion?
I would assume the answer is yes. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but it's been rather quiet in the last 2 weeks as far as, we aren't seeing new letters of support or opposition coming up from either side. I think folks have been in wait-and-see mode, waiting for this language to come out, which came out today. But we don't expect their position to change.
Just out of curiosity, what was the argument at committee for the contiguous county? I mean, just because PG&E wanted it, or did they make up some kind of logic of why they wanted that in there? Or did the committee members not even ask why they wanted it in there?
They had to get something.
Yeah, they attempted a connection there that related to, they kind of threw out some scenarios that MCE could expand to San Diego, and that's not really the intent of the original law. And community choice needs to be community-based. So those are some. And there was also some, I think it was revealing some of the comments around protecting IOUs from CCAs becoming too big, and that we needed to protect our IOUs from not having too much competition. Yeah. That word wasn't used, but that was the gist of it.
Now that we're sponsoring the train and the fair,
That was the straw that we could get for sure. We got the solar powered stage.
Thank you, Don. So Jeremy, you're going to do...
I guess I have the honor of being the last staff member between you and your July 4th break. So I'll try to be as expedient as I can with this. You're going to cover two topics, but really one in depth and the other will just be a little teaser, because I know you always want to hear more about regulatory at later times. The first topic is the PG&E General Rate Case Phase 1. This is the massive proceeding that happens every 3 years. Really where PG&E establishes their rates and the revenue requirement that they need to collect from all of their customers. I'll get into more depth later. And then the second topic is about resource adequacy and flexible capacity. There's a decision just voted upon by the Commission that creates new procurement obligations that will impact MCE and the procurement that we will have to conduct in the next year. And I'll provide a little color on that, but we're going to have that topic addressed later in a technical committee meeting so that we can get into the depth that the board members really want to hear. So, as I started to say, the general rate case is a process that all three utilities go through, and it's a laborious one. Their initial filing is hundreds of pages in length. Even the proposed decision that's out that I'll be talking about was over 700 pages in length, so this is no small lift. It happens on a 3-year cycle, and thankfully at least they stagger it, so 1 year PG&E will kick off their cycle, the next year San Diego kicks off their cycle, and the next year Edison kicks off theirs. And I'd say this is a really good reason from the regulatory team perspective of why we want to continue to just serve one IOU service territory, because we really don't want to be dragged into more than one of these proceedings. It's not fun. There are 2 phases, and there are actually 2 separate filings, one for phase 1, one for phase 2. The phase 1 is primarily there just to address what's the overall amount of money that PG&E needs to collect from ratepayers to cover all the different types of costs they'll face. And it's costs like general overhead, costs of maintenance of their plants and facilities, and so forth. The phase 2 proceeding is how then, once they have this target pool of money that they need to collect, who are they going to collect it from? How does the breakout of collections in rates apply to different customer classes? How does it apply within, phase 1 affects more of how it applies within distribution rates and generation rates, which is where our concern is more located, because our customers are only paying PG&E's distribution rates and related delivery charges, but paying our generation rate. So it has some shape on what our customers are on the hook for, and then also what our generation rates will need to look like to be competitive with PG&E's own rates. And as I said, it's a 3-year cycle, so once approved, this is setting the baseline for PG&E's rates and rate structure for the next 3 years. Now, as we know, PG&E keeps having to increase their rates for one reason or another, and this is a constantly evolving process, but this is the kind of backbone of how PG&E's rate process works. So the initial application for PG&E's phase 1 for the 2014 through 2016 cycle was filed late in 2012 with the intent that it would be delved into in 2013 and hopefully voted out by the end of that year. It didn't quite get done that quickly, as it never does. Within the tome of the application, we found 2 areas that were of pretty high concern to us, and rose to the level that we needed to file testimony to call out how they would impact CCAs and CCA customers in a way that would be not competitively neutral or would be competitively advantageous for the utility. One of them, this one's pretty in the weeds, so it's a little harder to explain, but when PG&E decides of the revenue requirement, how much goes into the distribution, how much goes into generation, they do this by kind of tallying how much labor that they have paid for that's supporting the distribution side, or how much labor they've paid that's supporting the generation side. And there are other types of labor that don't really fall into either of those categories. And one of them is the public purpose programs, which are, amongst other things, are energy efficiency programs. In our case, we have energy efficiency programs. We have no distribution monies to be collecting labor dollars from for energy efficiency programs. So our energy efficiency program is either funded by the pot of money that the CPUC has given to us, or it's funded through general generation dollars that we collect from all our ratepayers. And so we found that it was unfair for PG&E collecting labor costs from the distribution rate, because in a way our customers are paying twice over for energy efficiency related labor, once for our program and once for PG&E's program. And so we filed testimony to that extent to see if we could get some traction amongst other parties to try to work towards a better solution. The second issue that we had was with some litigation proceeds that were of no small amount, dealing with issue between PG&E and the Department of Energy, and this is dealing with PG&E's nuclear facilities. It's dealing with the fact that the federal government still doesn't have a good place to store nuclear waste. And so PG&E is stuck temporarily storing all the excess waste from Diablo Canyon and from the Humboldt Bay facility that's no longer in operation. And there are ongoing costs associated with having to store this radioactive material. And those costs are being paid for by PG&E's ratepayers. And at this point, it's past the point where the federal government had promised they would have a facility up and running. And so these costs are unfairly continuing to be imposed on PG&E's ratepayers. And through litigation, they're getting a windfall back to help offset these costs. And our issue was, the initial proposal PG&E had was, great, we're getting this big pool of money back, and we're even going to keep getting money back over the next few years before the feds finally figure out what to do. And we'll just put it all in our gen rate. We'll just bring it down a little bit and help everyone's rate. And by everyone, meaning their bundled customers. I said, no, that doesn't quite sound right, especially because this money is going back quite a few years to the point where our customers have been paying into it long before they were even our customers, before there was a differentiation between PG&E customers and MCE customers. And so that was another item where we were trying to find some better way to return these monies to customers that would not create some competitive advantage to PG&E through subsidizing their generation rate. And in response to our testimony, TURN filed some rebuttal testimony that in a way challenged our understanding of some of the topics, because we were just getting into this, but also added some weight of legitimacy that brought it to the next step in the process, which simply are settlement negotiations. And on both of these topics, we actually had settlement negotiations between ourselves, the Utility Reform Network, or TURN, and PG&E, and we were able to come to an agreement on two competitively neutral solutions to both of these issues. And I'll get into the exact details of that, but to continue with the timeline, that happened mid-2013, and now finally we have a decision on phase 1 and the comments that will follow. So what's in this proposed decision that correlates directly to our concerns? First off, it's adopting both of our settlement recommendations that we, TURN and PG&E, formally presented to the Commission with no sorts of revisions, which is good news. For the PPP settlement, what that ended up doing is it reduced the amount of overhead costs by those labor factors I was talking about earlier. It reduced the amount of overhead that's being allocated to distribution by $32 million. So it's not exactly that we've saved our customers $32 million, it's that all distribution customers have been saved $32 million, and our share of what we pay into distribution is reflected in that. So we've saved our customers some money in that way, and we've also eliminated the instance of this double collection that was problematic in a competitive light. For the DOE settlement, and rather than having these funds returned exclusively to the generation rate, there was a weighting process that evaluated based upon what those dollars were really collected for, and whether it was truly a generation related function or if it was more of general PG&E operations. It also was weighted based upon the timing of when these dollars were collected and the timing of when loads departed from PG&E. So our customers, once they've left PG&E, they're no longer having to pay into these costs, so they're only entitled to the costs up to their point of departure. It's all in the work, in the math, but the amount of money that was being negotiated over was no small amount at $340 million. So that's a refund that will be showing up in part in some distribution rates for customers, and in some customers, the amount will correlate, as I said, with timing and how much they ended up having to pay in. So it's doing a much better job of balancing, of taking those proceeds and balancing the cost that customers actually bore in the first place. So there is one remaining issue that we're not thrilled about, and if you look at this dollar amount, it's not quite on the same scale, but it's a kind of if you give a mouse a cookie sort of situation where in quite a few past PG&E GRC cycles, the Pacific Gas and Electric has asked to collect a certain amount of customer retention expenses from their rates, from their customers. And what exactly customer retention is a little nebulous, but it relates to the expenses that PG&E incurs while having to deal with the fact that customers don't want to stay with PG&E service. And there is some question about whether these costs are efforts on PG&E's behalf to retain these customers, or if these costs are really simply there to provide a more, I guess, empirical information base to advise local governments on what it's really going to cost them to municipalize, or what it's really going to cost them and their communities to leave and join a CCA. PG&E did provide some clarity in this cycle that these funds do not relate, what they're asking for here does not relate to CCA departing load and the CCA-related customer retention. In fact, CCA-related customer retention costs are collected below the line, in essence, collected from their shareholders rather than the ratepayers. But this would be collecting $1.5 million from ratepayers that would be potentially used to discourage municipalization, the formation of publicly owned utilities. We know that various communities like the city of Davis have been considering this route for some time. And this is something that PG&E really doesn't like to see happen, and they definitely rattled their saber whenever any local government talks about municipalization. So they claim that this money is just going to be going to crunching numbers and showing these communities what it's really going to cost them to make that move. But as I was saying, in past years, they've never been allowed to collect this money from ratepayers. And this could be the first year that they'd be allowed to collect customer retention monies from ratepayers. And it seems a little perverse to have customers paying the utility to then convince those customers to stay customers of the utility. Does that make sense? And as I said, this doesn't directly impact CCA, but what about next time? Maybe next time they'll ask for some money that would also go towards CCA, retention of customers that could be lost to CCA. And the fact that it's $1.5 million is not much, and I think overall the amount that's being approved in this GRC cycle is in the matter of $7 billion, so it's in the weeds. It's pennies, it's fractions of pennies, but the next time around they could ask for a whole lot more money, and they could point to this decision and say, well, we granted it last time around. Why isn't $30 million reasonable this next year? So we're working with the other parties that have proposed this, and we're trying to get some action by July 8th, which is the first comment period, and reply comments are July 14th. As you'll note, and I'm sure it's on your mind too, we have this holiday weekend here, and it's kind of causing problems. I've actually spent the last couple of days calling around to these other parties, and even some that aren't there, like the Utility Reform Network. We gave them a call and found out all of their attorneys are on vacation right now. We could not reach anyone directly related to the case in the Office of Ratepayer Advocates for similar reasons. And even with Merced Irrigation District and Modesto Irrigation District, I did get a hold of someone, but it's not the direct attorney on the case because she's out on vacation too. So we are keeping our fingers crossed that there will be some comments against that ask for money next Tuesday, and we will certainly be providing those comments in our own filing. And we will attempt to work with other parties to get the Commission to see the light on that issue. But otherwise, we feel that this is a very good decision coming out of the Commission. And it will be voted on in August. And so here's just the little teaser on resource adequacy. There's been a long-standing proceeding to explore resource adequacy at the Commission. Resource adequacy or capacity is the bandwidth within the grid that all load-serving entities, all service providers, so utilities, CCAs, direct access providers, they all have to contribute towards this, having this redundancy in the grid in case there are emergencies. And in the past, there's been a system capacity and a local level capacity. The system is just statewide, it's in the state grid and ready to answer some need, and the local is not that local, but it's more localized than just statewide. Now there's a call for flexible capacity, which is capacity that can respond to emergency need in a very quick window of time, in a way that old gas-fired plants can't respond to. And this is really coming out of the introduction of more and more renewables into the grid, and the fluctuations of the generation of renewables into the grid. As wind ebbs and flows, the generation does the same, and as clouds come and go, the generation from solar comes and goes. And when there's that dip, we need to have something to kick in and fill in that dip. So what this means to us, to the CCA, is next year we get to procure some flexible capacity along with the system and local capacity. And it's a brand new market, and it's a little unclear to entities what will qualify for this resource. It's all moving very quickly. There's a lot of political pressure behind us at the Commission to get this going, and we are staying on top of it. And as I said, in the subsequent TechCom, I will be presenting on this. Greg Bremen will be backing me up to provide the procurement side as well to show how we've got our bases covered and we're ready to take on this next obligation. And that's it.
Great. Any questions? Yeah, very thorough. Thank you. Okay, item 13, board member and staff matters for the good of the order.
I have just one comment. I wanted to let folks know that we are working on an adjustment to the way that our budget is presented to the board. There was a suggestion made in our last board meeting. So I just wanted y'all to know that we have been working with the monitors on that, and also with Director McCaskill, who has a lot of great experience in the budget world. And so we will be talking about this again at XCOM, and then likely be preparing with a new format the following time. So just wanted folks to know that that's in the works.
And we provided a draft of that at their desk.
Oh yeah, okay. So there is a draft format in front of you. And if you have any thoughts on it, feel free to let any of us know. We can incorporate that into your next discussion.
Thanks a lot. Any further items?